Revenge with Karen. The last time I touched the override switch, my coffee was still warm, and the plant floor smelled like ozone and cheap brake pads. I'd done it every Friday at 4:45 p.m. for 17 years, like a ghost clocking into purgatory. No one saw me do it. No one asked. Hell, most of them didn't even know the console still worked, let alone what it prevented. They all thought the plant ran itself now, one big humming, linking monument to automation. That's the thing about legacy systems. They don't scream when they are ignored, they wait, they watch. And when someone yanks out the last human hand holding the wheel, they let go with the kind of silence that costs 7 figures by Monday. You want to know what gets you fired after 2 decades? It's not a screw-up, not in a place like this. It's becoming invisible. I was too consistent. Never late, never loud, never political. I wore the same steel-toe boots until the soles curled like bad pizza. I ran diagnostics in silence, while the boys in high-vis vests patted each other on the back for discovering slack threads. Now, listen, I get it. This ain't some sob story begging for sympathy. If you're still with me, do me one favor. Tap that like button and hit subscribe. Seriously, 97% of folks ghost these stories without subbing. And trust me, that number keeps our editor crying into his 4th monster energy. Give the man some hope, yeah. Anyway, every Friday, while the plant's leadership high-fived over predictive maintenance charts they didn't understand, I walked past the vending machine that only took quarters, through the back door marked Authorized Only, and into the utility corridor no one bothered to map after 2008. Down there, under a flickering light, and next to an ancient water heater that whined like it was haunted, sat Console 9B. No Wi-Fi, no Ethernet, just a grease-smeared keyboard and a switch guarded by a 2-factor process older than TikTok and twice as cranky. I had to insert a plastic punch card, yeah, like the kind your grandpa used, and turn a physical key. Then, and only then, would the system register a heartbeat for the fail-dead protocol. If I skipped it, the plant had 168 hours before the whole production line bricked itself into a $3 million paperweight. Not because I was trying to be clever. Because back in 08, after a ransomware scare nearly torched our servers, the then CTO, God rest his ulcer-riddled soul, implemented a kill switch system that only 2 people ever learned, him and me. The idea was noble: no override without a human presence, no restarts unless you could physically prove you were there. Over time, the CTO retired. The paperwork vanished into storage boxes under broken ceiling tiles. And me, I stayed, because the line kept moving and nobody asked questions when their paycheck cleared. Well, almost nobody. They started calling me Redundant Rita behind my back a few years ago. Not out of malice, just that casual, office-born ignorance that thinks anything not in the cloud must be expendable. I heard them joke that I was part of the furniture. One guy suggested they replace me with a Roomba and a YouTube tutorial. Funny thing, though, furniture doesn't keep the lights on when your SCADA interface crashes and screams in hexadecimal. But I didn't say anything. I nodded. I helped. I kept the loop going. Friday at 4:45, same routine. Override engaged. Line secure. Another week of production ensured by someone they thought could be outsourced to a checkbox. That's the beauty of quiet women in loud rooms. We're always the last ones they see, and the first ones they miss when everything goes dark. He arrived on a Monday morning with 2 white sneakers and a buzzword addiction. Jackson Callahan. Age, maybe 30. Background, MBA from somewhere expensive and coastal. Attitude, like he thought he was the first man to ever discover Lean Six Sigma and black coffee. Within an hour of his first briefing, he'd already used the phrase optimize legacy friction points 5 times. By lunch, he'd replaced our shift manager's whiteboard with a touchscreen that didn't work if your gloves had oil on them, so basically always. By day's end, he was telling anyone who'd listen that this plant runs itself now. And I, me, the fossil in the corner with 17 years of red-tagged problem-solving and grease under my nails, had been downgraded to what he called historical support, like I was a walking footnote. The first time I met him formally, he called me Rachel twice before I corrected him. When I did, he smirked and said, "Oh, Rita. Right. Redundant Rita, yeah. Just like that." He thought it was funny. I should be flattered by the nickname that made me a punchline in his reorg fantasy. I gave him a thin smile and said nothing. Didn't flinch. Didn't explain. What's the point? During his first all-hands, he clicked through a 72-slide PowerPoint and bragged about migrating our legacy processes into a more intuitive, cloud-forward ecosystem. He called our analog logs antiquated liabilities. I watched the maintenance crew nod politely, knowing half of them still wrote critical repair notes on napkins and duct tape. Later that day, I tried to brief him, out of protocol, on the weekly override. You know, the thing that keeps the whole damn line from shutting down catastrophically. I scheduled a 15-minute sit-down, marked mandatory in all caps. He walked in 7 minutes late, AirPods still in, holding a green juice and scrolling something on his smartwatch. "Okay, shoot," he said, sitting back like I was about to pitch him an app. I laid it out, brief, clear. Explained the protocol. Showed him the punch card, the switch. Walked him through the consequence of skipping it. That there was no remote override, no digital alert. Just a timer buried in pre-cloud code that would assume a full system lockdown, if not physically reset every 168 hours. His reply? "Yeah, I'm sure IT has a workaround, probably just a BIOS lock or something." Then he waved his hand, actually waved me off, and said, "Look, I trust your instincts, but we're modernizing. I don't think we need to get too precious about manual rituals. Let's focus on scalable solutions." Scalable solutions. The man didn't ask a single question about the console. Didn't take a note. Didn't even look at the laminated flowchart I slid across the table. Just snapped a photo of it like he might upload it to some Slack channel called #BoomerTechFail and laugh over lunch. By the end of week 1, he'd rolled out 3 new dashboards, none of which could detect a stuck valve, but all of which sent push notifications whenever someone clocked in late. He implemented efficiency monitors that slowed us down with biometric scans that didn't work with calloused fingers. And he removed all the old logbooks because, quote, "no one reads analog anymore." But he never once, not once, asked me what the override actually did. That was the moment I felt it, like a cold wind down your spine before a thunderstorm. He didn't just not care, he refused to care. Because to him, the idea that some old, half-lit hallway held more authority than his cloud-based dashboards. That I, the quiet woman with the coffee breath and the same zip-up fleece since Obama's first term, I'd hold the keys to the kingdom? Unthinkable. I kept doing my job, kept flipping the switch every Friday like always. But that storm was coming. I could smell the ozone, and when it hit, I knew who'd be standing under the tallest damn tree. It happened like all factory deaths do, quietly and with a clipboard. Thursday, 2:12 p.m. I got the calendar ping like it was just another check-in. No subject. Just meeting ops director plus HR. Plus HR tells you everything you need to know. The conference room smelled like toner and peppermint hand sanitizer. Jackson sat at the head of the table, flanked by a red-cheeked HR intern who looked like she practiced her concerned nodding in the mirror. He was grinning like a possum in a chicken coop. "We'll keep this brief," he said, flipping a folder open with one smug finger. "We've completed a departmental audit and identified some redundancies in personnel." I said nothing, just folded my hands in my lap like I was back in Catholic school, waiting for Sister Janice to explain how sin works. He glanced down at the paper like he was reading the terms on a toaster box. "We appreciate your years of service, but effective immediately, your role has been classified as non-essential." Then he actually chuckled. "Guess that makes you redundant Rita for real now." I watched his lips move. All I could hear was the hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant echo of hydraulic presses still running, because I had flipped the switch last week. HR handed me a white envelope like it was some kind of condolence prize. Severance packet, Cobra info, non-disclosure agreement, all the paperwork they probably printed on Monday and just waited to deliver. I stood, smoothed my shirt. No tears, no screaming, just a nod. Jackson tilted his head like he expected me to beg. "Do you have any questions?" I looked him dead in the eye and said no. "I don't think you'd understand the answers." He blinked, confused, then laughed because of course he did. "Okay, well, good luck out there." Security met me at my cubicle, not the usual guys either. These were contract temps, fresh off some warehouse gig. Didn't know my name, didn't speak. Just loomed while I slid my coffee mug notebook, the punch card, the original one, mind you, into a cardboard box that once held reams of paper. As I walked out, no one looked up. The floor buzzed like normal, people typed, phones rang, and I was a ghost in steel toes, disappearing one step at a time. I swiped my badge at the side gate out of habit. It blinked red. Already dead. They'd killed my access before my chair was cold. I stood there for a second, blinking in the sun like I'd just walked out of a bunker. There was this peculiar quiet in my chest, not sadness, not yet. Just this pause, like the moment right before a train hits the curve too fast. I looked down at my watch. 2:46 p.m. If I'd stayed another 2 hours, I would have done the override. One last time. But instead, I left the plant floor humming toward a cliff, and nobody, not a single soul, had a clue what wasn't coming. As the security gate clanged shut behind me, muttered the date under my breath. Thursday. That gives it 7 days. Then I went home, poured a black coffee, and sat in my garden while the world kept turning, just a little more unstable than it realized. Friday came with the same damp breeze and diesel stink it always did, like the air itself remembered my routine, even if the plant no longer did. I woke up at 6 out of habit. No alarm, just 17 years of muscle memory dragging me vertical. Drank my coffee black and bitter. Folded the laundry I forgot in the dryer overnight. The cat watched me like she knew something was off. I didn't put on my steel toes, didn't throw on my high-vis vest, just slipped into a faded t-shirt and stretched sweatpants like I was a civilian again. Felt strange, like walking around without skin. I checked the clock around noon, ate lunch, watered the succulents, rerouted a package from UPS. All of it normal. Too normal? But under it, under everything, was the tick, tick, tick of a silent countdown buried in a system that couldn't scream. At exactly 4:45 p.m., I stood at the sink washing out a mug when I looked up at the oven clock and smiled. Right then, right at that moment, the line at the plant triggered its final heartbeat. The air-gapped protocol, the one nobody had updated or even acknowledged in 15 years, registered its first missed reauthentication in over 800 weeks. There was no alert, no siren, just a line of code that quietly flicked from green to yellow in the back end of a system no one monitored anymore. In 168 hours, that yellow would turn red. And then, without ceremony or fireworks, every primary process in that plant, presses, stampers, rollers, packagers, would halt. Permanently. Not because it failed, because it was doing what it was designed to do. Fail dead. I didn't feel rage or smugness. What I felt was eerie calm, like I was watching a thunderstorm form on a distant hill while sipping chamomile tea. The kind of calm that only comes when you know something big is coming, and you're the only one who's read the script. I didn't tell anyone, no texts, no subtle hints, just silence. I picked up a paperback I'd been meaning to finish, some slow burn thriller where everyone's lying and no one gets away clean. Read 60 pages without blinking. Then I made dinner, chopped onions, stirred sauce, played a vinyl of Fleetwood Mac because the skips reminded me the world still had imperfections. The factory, as far as I knew, kept humming that night. Forklifts beeped. Workers clocked out. No alarms, no hiccups. Just the sound of a billion-dollar operation sailing calmly toward the edge of an unmarked cliff. I turned the page. Another chapter. Another sip of tea. They thought I was redundant, replaceable, an outdated line item on a spreadsheet. But systems remember, they always do. Monday opened with silence. Not the usual kind, the brief hush before the day shift starts cussing over burned coffee and jammed badge readers. This was a different silence. Mechanical. No hum. No whir. Just the blinking lights of $1 million lines sitting there like a taxidermied beast, polished and lifeless. The presses didn't press. The rollers didn't roll. Conveyor belts froze in place, caught mid-cycle with half-crimped components still hanging like dead weight. At 6:03 a.m., one of the floor managers, Hector, a good guy with bad knees, called IT to say the auto-start sequence hadn't triggered. He thought maybe the new dashboard system was still syncing. At 6:14, when nothing moved, he walked down the line himself, clipboard shaking in one hand, and manually triggered a restart. The system blinked, then blinked again. Then stayed dark. Error code, null auth 9b, which no one had ever seen before. By 7:00 a.m., 2 engineers and the night tech lead were crowded around the main terminal. They rebooted the HMI, disconnected and reconnected the PLCs, pulled diagnostics, tried a full systems refresh from backup. Nothing worked. The new director, Jackson, strutted in at 8:17 with a protein shake and a Bluetooth headset like it was just another Monday. By 8:20, he was pale. By 8:45, he was yelling, "Why the hell didn't anyone log this over the weekend?" One of the engineers, young guy, good with Python but bad with pressure, said, "We didn't see anything, sir. No alerts, no logs, no crash. The dashboard thinks everything's fine." Jackson blinked like that was personally offensive. "Well, obviously it's not fine, is it?" He snapped. This has to be firmware or one of the legacy bridges. There's probably an old patch conflicting with the upgrade we pushed last week. Someone called the vendor. Calls were made. Vendors were confused. No one could replicate the failure in test environments. The log said the line had initialized. The dashboard said green. The floor said dead. At 9:12, a meeting was scheduled, then another, then 5 more. Jackson gathered the operations leads in the main conference room and ranted for 40 minutes about modernization gaps and siloed technical liabilities. Translation: he had no idea what was wrong, but it damn sure wasn't his new systems. Meanwhile, I sat on my back porch in a sun-faded lawn chair, sipping coffee with both hands like it was sacred. The neighbor's lawnmower droned in the background. My cat chased a bee she was never going to catch. I felt weightless. I didn't call, didn't email. I'd left no backdoor, no breadcrumb trail. They didn't even know what they didn't know, because Jackson had never asked, not once. And now his line, was playing dead with the dedication of a possum under threat. Quiet satisfaction doesn't need a stage. It doesn't need applause. It just is. So while Jackson pounded his fist on a conference table, demanding someone bring me every single override code on file, I turned a page in my book and smiled. They were looking in the wrong century. By Tuesday morning, the panic had graduated from internal memos to chartered flights. They flew in 2 contractors from Boston, guys with fancy laptops and lanyards that said Senior Integration Specialist, like that title ever moved steel. I recognized one of them from a vendor demo 3 years back. He'd once bragged he could optimize any control system in under an hour. I bet him a 50 he couldn't even find console 9B without a map. He laughed. Never paid me. Well, he was back. And this time he wasn't laughing. They started with firmware, wiped it, reflashed it, twice. That killed all the automation customizations Jackson had championed over the last 2 months. All those pretty dashboards, gone. All the filters and real-time metrics, obliterated. The line still didn't budge. By lunchtime, cracked open the master control unit like it owed them money. Tried a root-level boot override. Still nothing. The screen just blinked, waiting for auth, protocol S913. Nobody knew what S913 was, because that wasn't the name in the manual. That wasn't the name in any digital documentation. That name only existed on a paper flowchart drawn by the old CTO, God rest him, taped to the wall above console 9B like a forgotten family photo. You don't get that kind of knowledge by Googling. You get it by being there for 17 years and listening to a man chain smoke his way through a security briefing while muttering about idiot-proofing the apocalypse. By Wednesday, they were ripping apart backup systems, trying to find the missing handshake. One poor kid spent 4 hours digging through archived schematics, printed on thermal paper, only to discover that half of them had faded to ghostly soup. Jackson paced like a coked-up stockbroker. He stopped shaving, started snapping at everyone. He told corporate it was a cascading hardware conflict with undocumented legacy behavior. Fancy speak for I have no idea, but it sounds expensive. And it was expensive. Every hour of downtime was bleeding money like a ruptured pipe. I figured they were closing in on $9 million by the time Wednesday night hit, and still, not 1 inch of conveyor moved. That's when the text started. First, it was Hector, hey, just checking in. You okay? Then Sandra from admin, Rita, did you ever run into something called Protocol S913? And finally, IT Mike, my favorite disaster goblin. I swear to God, if you're watching this with popcorn, I'm buying you a steak. I didn't respond. Not yet. I just read each message slowly, one by one, and let them sit there like old voicemails from ghosts still stuck in the machine. That evening, I poured myself a glass of red wine and watched the sun set behind the row of maples in my yard. My cat curled up on my feet, purring like she'd been promoted. There's a certain detached amusement in watching the house you were pushed out of slowly forget how to turn on its own lights. Not bitterness, not cruelty, just satisfaction. They'd spent 3 days trying to reboot a heart they didn't know was mine. And now they were realizing some things don't live in code. Some things only live in people. Thursday morning broke hard and gray, like even the sky was hungover from corporate denial. The factory floor sat frozen for the 5th straight day, a $3 million a day monument to managerial ego. Jackson hadn't gone home since Tuesday. Rumor had it he'd tried sleeping in the office, but the motion-activated lights kept turning off every 20 minutes, so he just paced like a malfunctioning Roomba in designer sneakers. His last Hail Mary, trying to reroute the system through a cloud bridge, had crashed the internal network for 6 straight hours. At 8:03 a.m., the big guns arrived. The CEO flew in on the company jet, landing with a face that could sour milk and a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my first car. His shoes hit the polished concrete with precision, like he expected the floor to bow under him. He didn't shake hands, didn't do the whole team huddle crap. He went straight into the glass conference room, shut the blinds, and summoned everyone with a badge that still beeped green. They brought binders, printouts, USPs, none of it mattered. Around 10:17 a.m., someone, probably Mike, bless him, dug into the archived physical logs stashed in what used to be my desk drawer. The drawer no one ever opened because they thought everything important is on the server now. He found it. Yellowing paper. Faded ink, scrawled in Sharpie across the top. Manual Redundancy Protocol SJ. SJ for Stephen J. Weller, the retired CTO. And below that, in neat block print, weekly auth assigned to RL. Rita L. Kerrigan, my full name. In ink, no ambiguity. The room went still. Like someone had hit a kill switch on conversation itself. Jackson tried to laugh it off. Okay, so maybe she used to be part of the chain. But I mean, there's gotta be a workaround, right? Like a recovery key or, I don't know, maybe someone else got trained. Mike didn't answer, just slowly turned the document so the CEO could read the fine print near the bottom. Note, if weekly manual authentication is missed, system enters irreversible fail-dead countdown. No remote override. Protocol designed to assume breach. And right there, underlined twice, final override resides solely in physical possession of RL. Kerrigan, not stored digitally. Do not replicate without written CTO approval. CEO looked up and said the words I knew were coming. Where is she? Phones started buzzing. Desk chair squeaked. Someone ran a search for my HR file. Another pulled up my emergency contact info. And somewhere in that mess of breathless damage control, my phone lit up with an unknown number. It rang once, then twice. I let it, 3 times, 4. The 5th ring hit, and I picked up like I'd just been asked to sub in for bingo night. Hello, a pause, then the voice. Strained, edges fraying under years of boardroom polish. Miss Kerrigan, this is Richard Kessler, CEO of Rhinatech Industries. I'd like to speak with you. Do you have a moment? I sipped my coffee, French press, dark roast, a little cinnamon, and said nothing. Because for the first time in 17 years, my name wasn't buried in a spreadsheet or mispronounced in a meeting. It was spoken with reverence. Urgency. Like a door only I could open. Could almost hear Jackson sweating on speakerphone in the background, whispering something like, just be nice, just be nice. The pause stretched. And then I said it, calm, measured, no gloat. I've got a moment, but I don't think your system does. Silence. The wall had cracked, and I was standing on the other side, holding the only key that ever mattered. He called again at 10:38 a.m., this time from his direct line. No assistants, no middlemen, just the CEO of a billion-dollar corporation dialing a woman he'd once passed in the hallway without so much as a nod. I answered on the second ring, let him sit in that brief, brittle silence. Miss Kerrigan, he said, voice low, raw at the edges. Thank you for picking up. I wanted to speak to you personally. I didn't respond. Let him fill the void. He sighed, that long kind of exhale that comes after your empire gets sucker-punched by its own arrogance. Reviewed the documents, the logs, the protocol. The engineers can't make heads or tails of it. They say you were the last person who handled the sequence, the only one. Still, I said nothing. Then came the question, soft, not corporate, not barked. Human, can it be reversed? That's when I felt it, this shift, like a gear finally locking into place. 17 years of being overlooked, minimized, waved off like static in the background. Now they needed my voice like oxygen. I set my coffee down gently, sat straighter, took one long breath. Then I said it, clear and cold as a scalpel, no, it can't. Silence. He tried again. I understand this must be frustrating, but there must be something we can. I cut him off. The protocol was built during a security overhaul in 08. Fail-dead structure. If no manual authentication is performed within 168 hours, system assumes compromise. Every control pathway is severed permanently. No remote access, no software patches, no resets. The only failsafe was the human in the loop. Another pause, and that's you, he said, hollow. I didn't confirm, he already knew. He cleared his throat. We're at a standstill. The losses, I stopped him again. I know exactly what the losses are. I used to be the one updating the downtime reports no one read. He flinched, audibly, soft clench in his breath. Then, quieter, we should have listened to you. That was the first honest sentence I'd ever heard out of corporate. But honesty doesn't rewind time. I tried to brief your operations director, I said, voice level. He smirked. Called me redundant Rita. Didn't ask a single question about the override. Didn't want to know. I know, he whispered. The guilt in his voice wasn't performative. It was the kind that seeps in when numbers finally gain faces. Redundancy turns into millions evaporating by the hour and a factory full of stalled workers with rent to pay. We'll make it right, he said. I stood and walked to the window. Watched the breeze push the neighbor's wind chime into a lazy spiral. No, I said, you'll survive it, maybe, but you won't make it right. Some mistakes don't reset. He didn't argue. Thank you for your time, he said after a moment. If you change your mind, I won't. Then I hung up. No venom, no satisfaction, just surgical detachment. I stared out the window a moment longer, and then, finally, I allowed myself one thing I'd withheld for 4 days. A single, deep breath, that's it, no forgiveness, just breathe. Friday returned like a ghost, retracing its final steps. Same hour, same minute, 4:45 p.m. This time last week, the override would have clicked into place like a priest lighting the last candle before Mass. Now, the console sat dormant in a dark hallway no one dared walk down anymore. It had served its purpose. So had I. The plant hadn't produced a single unit in 7 days. The news hadn't broken yet, but it was coming. Vendors were nervous. Clients were demanding answers. The board was bleeding into their socks. Projected loss, $21.3 million, and climbing. That morning, a courier arrived at my door with a certified envelope. Thick paper, embossed return address. I didn't even have to open it to know what it was, but I did. Inside, a formal offer letter. Not an apology, not an explanation. Just numbers. Salary, triple my original. Position, Director of Legacy Operations. Perks, full pension restoration, back pay, private office, board seat. They'd even bolded that part. Like power could be printed. It would have been funny if it weren't so pitiful. There was a sticky note attached, in handwriting I didn't recognize. We realize now you weren't a redundancy. You were our continuity. Please consider returning. I folded it once, then again, then slid it into the recycling bin like a receipt for something I'd already returned. Because while they were scrambling to resurrect a ghost they'd buried, I had been busy living. My new LLC, Kerrigan Systems Continuity, had just inked its first full-service contract with their largest competitor. Wanted legacy knowledge, human expertise, real backups to the fantasy of automation. And they were willing to pay top dollar for the one thing Jackson's dashboards could never simulate, judgment earned in grease and silence. The deal was clean, lucrative, and poetic as hell. As the sun dipped low behind my fence, I stood on the porch in my threadbare hoodie, sipping from the mug they'd given me at my 10-year anniversary. The company logo had started to fade, just like the belief that they'd ever truly understood what I did. I wasn't bitter. I was done. No going back. No second tour. Just the quiet satisfaction of a door closed with precision. They had spent a week learning that not everything can be rebooted, that some systems don't fail, they remember. And some women don't forgive, they evolve. They called me redundant. But I was the keystone. And now, they're rubble. Big thanks, you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch-flicking chaos alive. Your ex-boss is shaking in their loafers.